So go small or go home. So let me repeat that. Go small or go home. So why would I stand up here in front of a group of smart, ambitious, and talented people who are looking for encouragement to go out and make a difference in the world, a world, by the way, in desperate need of change and of big change, and encourage you to shrink your vision? Well, in my own life, I found that the places where I've made the greatest impact have not come when I've tried to force the hand of providence to do something big, but rather when I've simply been an observer of the small, normal, mundane things in my life, things that are going on in my family, my community, and then stayed there. When I've really become a student of the small, when I've been more fully present in the little things. You know, a lot of times we look at people who have accomplished big things, and we think they've always had one of my favorite acronyms, BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. And they've probably had these since they popped out of the womb, which to me is terrifying because I don't have a 2-week plan for my life, let alone a 10-year plan for my life. And what I want to suggest to you, though, is that perhaps the key to living a life of big impact doesn't primarily start with the big, but rather it lies in beginning to let go of the focus on living a big impact life in the first place, by going small. And I don't know what this looks like for you in your particular life, but I want to share a little bit of my own story as an entrepreneur co-founding a local craft brewery called Monday Night, and just as a way to illustrate how the focus on the small things, being present in the daily little things that are going all around us all the time, has resulted in a business that is growing towards something much bigger. So I co-founded Monday Night with my 2 partners, Joel and Jonathan. We run a brewery up in right off of Howell Mill Road, down the road from here, behind the water reservoir. We distribute our beers throughout Georgia and Alabama. And what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of an overview of where we are today, what the business looks like now. So first, a few numbers. This year, we're on track to make over 5 million bottles of beer. Our sales reps will visit 10,000 accounts, places that sell our beer or that we hope will sell our beer. We're on track to bring over 50,000 people, host over 50,000 people in our brewery for public tours. And on top of that, we'll host 200 private events, which, you may not believe it, but includes quite a few weddings. Somehow, it continues to blow my mind, but there are at least a few dozen brides who somehow convinced their mothers that it's a good idea for them to get married in a brewery next to a water treatment plant. So we're still growing, too. In the last year, we've made meaningful investments in our facility. We've close to doubled our production capacity. We began canning our beers, which was a big investment. We opened and built one of the first, really only one of 2 laboratories in breweries in the city of Atlanta. And we've invested close to $100,000 in product development, which is, by the way, what resulted in my humble opinion, what are some of the best beers in the country right now. We, 3 of our 6 core beers have won national awards. One of the 6 only came out 2 weeks ago, so give us some time, please. And one of our beers, our bourbon barrel-aged drafty kilt, won a gold medal at the Great American Beer Festival, the most prestigious and competitive beer competition in the world. But what I love talking about most is our people. We have 20 full-time employees at Monday Night Brewing, people who are building their careers, providing for their families, doing what they love to do. On top of that, we have another 50 part-time employees. These are people who are working on the canning or bottling lines, maybe who are serving beer to you on a Saturday afternoon when you come to one of our tours. And when you do come to one of our tours, you're not going to be served beer by someone who's just there for a little bit of pocket change and checking their watch all the time to see when they get the clock out. Most likely, you're going to be having your beer served to us by one of our friends, an attorney or an accountant, a teacher, maybe even a pastor. These are people who are there because they want to help create a welcoming and warm environment where coworkers and friends and neighbors can connect and deepen their relationships with one another over some really phenomenal beer. One of my favorite places in the world is the Monday Night Brewing patio on a Saturday afternoon. People bring their dogs and their kids and their parents, and great conversations happen. When we designed the patio at Monday Night Brewing, we intentionally chose picnic tables as our seating option, with the express purpose of forcing people to share space with strangers, because we hoped they wouldn't be strangers at the end of the afternoon. And that happens. People connect not only over the beer, but also over more meaningful things, their joys and their triumphs, their struggles and their pain. Just last weekend, actually, I was at the brewery on Saturday afternoon and met a guy for the first time who had just broken up with his longtime girlfriend. And I'd met him for about 30 seconds before we started talking about that. It wasn't a long conversation, but it just goes to show the kind of environment that happens there. It's a pretty incredible place to be. So how does this happen? How does the feel of a place like that come about? Like I said at the beginning, it didn't happen with a big plan. We did have our business plans and our spreadsheets and our PowerPoint presentations and all that. But it all really started back at the beginning. It started with a small group of people who were committed to developing not a business plan, but deeper relationships with each other, with more attention to the small little things in each other's lives and in our own lives. So I want to take you back to the beginning. So I graduated from college in 2003, and a few years after that, I was in a small group Bible study with some guys in my church. Not what you were expecting, was it? We would gather together in one of the guys' living rooms at 6 a.m. on Friday mornings, which, by the way, is very early, especially for 25 years old. And we didn't really know each other very well. So as you can imagine, the conversation was not particularly energizing or open in talking about the meaning of life and things of substance. So the first thing that we did, though, was we acknowledged it. We weren't really fully present. We were showing up, I was showing up every week, but I wasn't really bringing all of me to the situation. I wasn't bringing who I was, and I wasn't particularly interested or committed to getting to know the other people that I was there with. So what do we do about it? Well, we did what any good Bible study would do who wants to get to know each other better, to be more fully present. We decided to brew beer together. And by the way, for those who don't know, Jesus' first miracle was turning water into wine. So in my own estimation, we were simply following the lead of the Almighty himself. So one Monday evening in 2006, we all gathered in the backyard and brewed a batch of spectacularly mediocre beer. And the best thing I can say about that batch of beer was that it tasted directionally like beer, and that we drank it. But we did accomplish the goal of growing our relationships with each other. At Monday Night Brewing, even to this day, we said this all the way back in the garage, beer is a relational beverage. There's something about a conversation when two people are having it, and they each have a beer in their hands, that walls go down and people open up. And that began to happen. So we decided we'd do it again the next week, and the week after that, and the week after that. And pretty soon we were making more beer than a single Bible study in good conscience could consume by itself. So we decided that we'd invite some friends and neighbors and coworkers. And for 4 years, in the backyard here at Claremont Street, right up the road, 25 to 50 people would pack into the garage in the driveway and brew beer together, talk, just be together. Now, my role in all of this was the maniacal recipe guy. I was the guy that was responsible for designing the recipes, tracking them on my spreadsheet. It was a very big spreadsheet. And really, making sure all the hops were weighed out appropriately, that the water temperature was exactly right. Because beer is, if you've never brewed before, beer is something that requires a tremendous amount of attention to the details. And there are lots of places where it can go wrong. And I was not about to let anything get in my way of getting to make better and better beer, including my own children. My son Teddy here was born in 2009, and I remember the look of horror on my wife's face one night when she came home, and he was strapped to my chest in a baby Bjorn while I stirred a boiling cauldron of hot beer. It worked out. 12 years this summer. But my favorite part of the night was the end of the evening. After the cleaning was done and the driveway began to empty out, we would start to meander over to the back porch. And the back porch was a really magical place. There was usually a small group of us left. Someone may have brought a rare beer to try, and we'd talk a little bit about what went well and what didn't. But mostly we would just talk about what was going on in our lives. When my son Teddy was born, we found out he had Down syndrome. And so that back porch was a beautiful place to begin to process and talk about that, to share the joy and challenge and sadness that all kind of mingled together with friends and also with some strangers. And that was really the beauty of those Monday nights. So how do you take that? How do you take this back porch and do that when you're a big business? How do you translate the small little garage to a big garage? How do you cultivate the intimacy and presence of a few friends gathered around a fire pit talking about things of substance? How do you turn that into something and preserve it when there could be 600 people that show up for a tour on a Saturday afternoon? So I want to share with you just a few specific things that we've done at Monday Night Brewing to try to cultivate that same feeling. So the first thing is that we studied the small. We spent a lot of time, Joel and Jonathan and I, really understanding what was it about those nights? What was it about that environment that made it really special, that created a place where people felt safe to really be themselves? And one of the things, as an example, that we found was what I like to call collective hospitality. So by that I mean, when people came to our house, it wasn't just me who was welcoming them into my home. My wife, obviously, but also Joel and Jonathan and our friends who became regulars on Monday evenings. And when I was running around like crazy, making sure that I had the right entry in my spreadsheet, I never worried that if someone came for the first time and wandered down the driveway, that they wouldn't be welcomed by someone, told they had a place to belong in that group, and led to the beer fridge. And then that they I'd never worried they wouldn't have a meaningful conversation with someone that was there. But when we went and opened the brewery, one of the things that we did to try to cultivate that same sense is that for the first 6 months that we gave tours, only one of the 3 founders gave a tour. You see, we wanted to be able to tell our story directly to people. We wanted to welcome them, to thank them for coming, for thanking them for their business, and also to encourage them to do that with each other, to welcome each other. And we wanted to model that for our employees, for our bartenders and our production teams, for our salespeople. And when it did come time to hire someone, which it inevitably did, we thought about it long and hard. And we didn't hire someone who was just getting paid $10 an hour to come in and tromp people through the brewery. We got a guy who had spent 10 years at Starbucks as a manager. He's a wonderful, kind, thoughtful guy with a really long beard named Duck. I mean, how perfect is that, right? And if you ever go on the Monday Night Brewing tour, then you'll get the experience of a tour with Duck. And what Duck does is he embodies that sense of collective hospitality. He's doing it with all of us. And when you finish that tour, if you see the people come out of that room, they get it. They're more connected to each other. They're more connected to the beer. And they'll go out and help make that tasting room, that patio, what it is today. The second thing that we did was we got even smaller in every aspect of our business. So that might sound a little strange, so let me give you an example to illustrate what I mean. Most breweries of our size don't invest in a laboratory. Now, labs are really helpful tools for breweries because they ensure that your product is consistent from batch to batch. And if there's a problem, it helps you to spot it early before it spreads, which it can. And as I said, most breweries our size don't invest in a laboratory. It's expensive. And even if they have some of the equipment, they probably don't have a full-time or a dedicated lab technician on staff. But we do. We made the choice to invest in that. We hired a smart, thoughtful graduate of an illustrious institution you may have heard of called Georgia Tech to work in our lab. Because we wanted the consistency of our beer to be fantastic. It was a critical cornerstone of the building trust with our consumers and of honoring all the hard work and energy that went into making each batch of beer by our brewers. Now, the third little example or specific way we translated that kind of small feel to something much bigger was by hiring people who understood the small, hiring people who were really focused on the details and who were going to sweat the small stuff for the right reasons. So this is Adam Bishop. Adam is our brewmaster, and we hired him while we were still building out our brewery. Adam had a critical role in designing every piece of equipment, all of the flow and processes. You know, we've had a lot of people in the business come through our brewery, and no one has a brewery like ours because every piece of equipment has been customized by this guy for a very specific purpose and to get everything exactly right. When we flew Adam down, we loved that about Adam, and we flew him down for his final interview before we hired him. We asked him, Adam, what else should we know about you before we make you an offer? And I'll never forget what he said. He said, well, he's a pretty matter-of-fact guy. He said, look, there may be a time when we make a beer that I'm not happy with. And if you want to sell beer that's not up to my standard, I'm not going to let you do it. I know you own the business, and I respect that, but I have to stand behind, and my reputation is behind every single beer that we send out this door. And so you just need to know that before you hire me. And I love that answer. And the next day we made him an offer. So my journey with Monday Night Brewing has not been one that started with grand plans. It's not one that started with big ideas. It really started with a group of people who developed a more intentional desire to cultivate the small little things in life, just to become observers. So the pathway to big, the gateway to big, it's not big. It's not through the big. The gateway to big is through the small. So become students of the small things in your life, in your community, and then stay there. So go small or go home. Thanks very much.